But before all that could take place, this moment happened. This was probably the most disheartening, saddest, most heartbreaking moments that the disciples probably could have ever faced. Why? Because the man that they had been following for so many years, the man that they had learned so much from, that taught them about love and grace and mercy and what the kingdom of God was like, was gone. And I can only imagine what they could have been feeling at that point. You see, most of the time, whenever our joy is taken away from us, the automatic reaction that we have is just to feel sorry for ourselves and to sit in our grief and our mourning. But see, Jesus didn't teach us like that. Jesus taught us to always be joyful, to always remember that God is providing for us. 1 Thessalonians 5:6 tells us to always be joyful. It's hard to be joyful whenever the worst possible scenario, the worst event that you could ever picture in your brain happens. It's hard to sit back and be happy, but that's not what Jesus is telling us. Jesus is telling us that in our mourning, we can still mourn, because that is a human reaction. The disciples still mourned whenever they lost Jesus. Well, what he's telling us is that we need to remember how blessed we are. We need to remember the things that God has provided for us and that God has come through on every single occasion. You see, in the book of Job, after he loses everything, he loses his family, he loses his livestock, he loses his wealth, he loses his property, he loses everything that he possibly can have possession over. He lost it all in a matter of one day. And whenever they came to him and said, finally, that his sons and daughters had died, he shaved his head in grief, he ripped off his clothes, and he said, "The Lord gave and the Lord takes away. Praise be the name of the Lord." How could you do that? How can you go from like losing everything to still praising God? It's because he had a choice to make. He could let the grief and the sadness and the despair overwhelm him and just become a shell of a person, or he can continue to remember, my God is going to provide. My God has always been faithful, and I can take joy in the fact that even though I'm in the worst situation, the worst event of my life, that I can still say that my God is faithful. Most of the time, we always talk about how joy is related to our happiness. The thing about happiness is that happiness is here 1 minute and then it's gone the next. Joy is continuously making a choice. I'm going to wake up and I am going to rejoice because Christ is in me and I am in him. He has redeemed me. He has saved me. He has brought me up from the muck and the mire. He has continued to show me his amazing love and his amazing grace. And I can rejoice knowing that even though I'm in the worst possible situation, the worst thing that I can possibly think of, my God is going to continue to pull me out of it. So I challenge us this week. Choose joy. The situation that we're dealing with, the coronavirus, with everything, it is unprecedented. We've never dealt with anything like this before. But what we can take solace in is that our God has gone ahead of us, and his hand has paved the way for everything that we need to do. And he is going to continue to provide, and he's going to continue to give us everything that we need, as long as we continue to keep our eyes set upon him. So this week, I want you to do something. Whenever you wake up, the first thing I want you to say is, today, God, I am going to choose joy. You can choose any number of emotions, but let that be the emotion that you choose to stick with for the rest of the day. I love you guys. I hope you guys are being safe. See you next week.